And many thanks to DSO for inviting the IEA to this meeting. I had the pleasure to follow some of the discussion this morning, and I can certainly say that I am the person among all of you that knows the least about distribution networks, but hopefully I will be able to give you a bit of a broader perspective of what the distribution network mean in today's energy system and in driving this global transition to net zero. Before starting with the slides, I would like to reflect with all of you on the starting point. And the starting point is really what has been agreed in Glasgow. We entered into a COP discussion in November last year, where energy-related emissions were more or less plateauing, but expected to then rebound and lead the world to an increase in temperature of around 3 degrees. Now, we are coming out of Glasgow with the pledges that Europe has made, Korea, China, India, the US. If you put them all together, if countries deliver on what they have promised in Glasgow, well, for the first time, the world will be leading towards a temperature increase below 2 degrees. So going into the high end of what was agreed 6 years ago in Paris. And sometimes I think we need to stop 1 second and reflect upon something that we may be able to experience this very decade, which is for the first time as humanity, we would be able to support a growing economy and starting seeing CO2 emissions going down. Now, promises are promises. The reality and hard truths of life sometimes are different. So what I would like to focus on the next 10 minutes is the following. Where are we really going and what do we need to do to meet these promises and where the distribution networks sit in this big energy transition we are witnessing. So I will now start sharing the slides and do the following. I will start with the following, starting with electricity. We always say, and we often hear that electrification is really the mantra for the future, and we do completely agree. Now, sometimes what we don't really capture is the magnitude of the change we may be having in front of us in terms of electricity demand growth. So what you're seeing here is not a forecast. This is where we would need to be if we were fully complying with getting to net zero by 2050. So what we have agreed in Paris, a step change compared to what we have actually been seeing in our advanced economies, where demand for electricity has actually plateaued for the past several years after 2008, basically, and very different from the demand growth, the pace of demand growth we are seeing and experiencing today in emerging economies. So a step change in this electricity demand. Where is it coming from? This is coming from a few sectors, which I would like to show you here. So why we are not expecting a huge increase in demand in the building sector, despite the fact that today we still have 800 million people not having access to electricity. 1 in 2 people in Africa, I would like to remind today, still don't have access to electricity. So a huge work that we still need to do there. The largest amount of increase in electricity demand we are expecting is coming from transport. We are seeing in Europe last year, 2021, our data show 10% on average of new cars sold were electric. In China, data for November showed that 20% of the sales in China of new cars were electric. And this is something that we are expecting to see and just continue to grow. This is changing the way we use electricity, are very different loads than the one that you are used to see normally, and it's going to see a change in profile in demand growth in Europe, in China, in India, and elsewhere. Key uncertainty for all of us is how quickly this will happen, and something that is difficult, this uncertainty, a new uncertainty on when these cars are going to be charged and how the distribution and the networks in general will need to adapt to these new loads. The other big change is hydrogen production and electrolyzers that will actually feed this hydrogen production. Another big rise for us in terms of new demand growth, as long and at the same time electricity on two things actually that I would like to pinpoint. Some of this electricity will actually eat up some of the demand that is currently met by gas for lower temperature heat, and increasing demand for electricity intensive products such as aluminium, where we're seeing increasing, because of the energy transition, increasing demand. So here electrification becomes keyword, but with new challenges in terms of amount of loads and how quickly this demand will grow. It's not a question of whether it will grow faster than it has in the past decade, but how quickly will we manage this electrification. Now, what are the challenges? The challenges for us are first and foremost an investment one. If you focus on the power sector alone, we are investing less than half. In fact, we would need to double plus 50%, 2.5 times current investment in the power sector, including networks. We are seeing this being insufficient everywhere, being insufficient in advanced economies, being insufficient in emerging economies. We are not talking about this, not nearly enough. So where do we need to invest? Now, focusing on the power sector, I would like to show and focus your attention on the pie chart there. We hear all the time, and luckily and very good, we always hear newspapers, politicians talking very much about the big success of renewables, which is a great story. Most of renewables today being competitive, huge progress made there in terms of clean energy transition. What we hear very little is the amount of new investments we need in grids. And if you look there, in fact, grids, networks, transmission, distribution is the largest portion of new investment needed to make sure that this transition happens. This is not a very popular subject of conversation. Very rarely you see the grids topic being discussed on newspapers. Increasingly, we are trying to push a bit of an alarm bell to politicians. Make sure that you have the right market design in place to attract this huge amount of new investments. Otherwise, grids may well become the brake to this clean energy transition. Why? Keep in mind one very simple number. If you are to install a solar park, you may need around 3 years. If you're planning transmission networks or distribution work, this may take up to 10 years. You have a mismatch there. So the planning and a more cohesive way of looking at the transition is going to be needed soon. Especially, I underline this, the investments to make sure that the regulatory framework are there to make sure that the new investments are flowing in a timely manner. Let's deep dive a bit more in these grids investments. Now, I don't want you to focus very much on the amount, but on the change that are needed. So here you see many different slides and colors. I'd like you to focus on the yellow bars, because the yellow bars is a scenario which is compatible with what has been agreed in Glasgow. So what we have agreed in Glasgow basically implies a 50% growth in investments needed annually on average globally in distribution networks. If we look at whether this money is about to flow, unfortunately, the answer is no. For a variety of reasons, the change between emerging economies and advanced economies, but again, market designs and the attention of policymakers to this issue is not yet there. So for us, this is a critical alarm bell. And if you look at the mismatch, we see clearly seeing a larger mismatch in emerging and developing economies, where electricity demand is going to grow the most, where capacity expansion is going to grow the most. But in advanced economies, we see emerging issues as well, because we need more investment in distribution and transmission networks for 3 critical reasons: maintenance and making sure that we have heard cybersecurity earlier. For us, this is becoming a critical issue. So new investment is in making sure that there is a grid upgrades, that there is a grid maintenance and digitalization made at the same time. Those investments seem to be #1 priority. Second, as electricity demand starts picking up again, we will need more of those investments because of more demand. And third, the increased amount of variable renewable in the systems in Europe and elsewhere will demand more of those investments going forward. So filling this shortfall is going to be of paramount importance very, very quickly. Now, I would like to talk about two other issues that we are seeing coming under, importantly, under the radar screen. All orderly transitions require a very important amount of critical minerals, and grids are not an exception here. When we look at the amount of demand for critical minerals around the world, this is growing very quickly. And we do see a potential mismatch between the amount of critical minerals needed throughout the clean energy value chain, grids, but also electric vehicles, but also renewables, and the fact that those are relatively concentrated, and a possibility that the demand for these minerals will create mismatch with supply at certain points. So for us, the new energy security paradigm will certainly have electricity and the grids being really the blood network to make this all work. But we will see also an increasing need to look at critical minerals going forward. And we are really trying to raise awareness on this issue. Now, a concluding point is about what you can see as an enormous opportunity going forward, and is about job creations. But it comes with a warning. So when we look at the net impact of how globally, in Europe, the numbers are very similar. The global clean energy transition, how will it change the workforce that we have currently in energy? What we see is an important net increase. Although we ring a bit of the alarm bell on some job losses that may occur in coal, oil, and gas-related communities, I would like to focus here on the huge amount of new jobs that we may be creating to install new electricity capacity, mostly renewables. But importantly, most of the increase that you see there in the blue line is actually coming for networks. Now, there is a huge opportunity. So all of you working in this space, in distribution and in transmission, you have a talent force that you have with you. And I would like to say that if the distribution is really the blood network for the clean energy transition, then the talent you have with you is like the blood cells that are navigating in this energy transition. Now, do we have enough of these blood cells? And are they the right blood cells? And what we see is a bit of a mismatch here. So I'd like to warn all of you, and especially those of you that are at the heads of those organizations, nurture your talents. Make sure that you prepare a new pipeline of talents coming in with new skills on cyber, on digital, that are higher skills than the normal one that the industry has deployed up to now. And importantly, start training the next generation of people that will come and work with you. So we see here a huge opportunity in terms of job creation across many geographies. But when we look at the skill profile that we currently have in the network industry and what may be needed going forward, we do see a bit of a mismatch there. And importantly, when we look at the lineup of who is coming out of university now, who is the pool of next generations, I would like to say here another watch out. So critically for us, the network is distribution network, transmission network. Both of them, I'd say, are very much being not spoke about enough at all levels, but are going to be critically important for the successful transition to net zero. We do have a real opportunity. We have never had it as humanity, as human being, as we have it now with the technologies that we have today. But 2-3 alarm bells. The first one, again, to wrap up on investment. I urge all of you to work more closely with policymakers to make sure that the market designs, the tariffs, the investment incentives are there to make sure that we expand, modernize, and make cyber-proof all our distribution networks. I would like to dismantle forever the idea that the false debate that has been in place for some time, in which going for renewables would have needed no more investment in transmission and distribution. We should stop that and just focus on the incremental new investment. Second, watch out for and working in collaboration with other relevant actors on the critical mineral side to make sure that you have the materials going forward to make sure the transition happens. And third and final, please nurture your talents, the current one and the future one. And I wish you all really a very, very good conversation going forward, just underlining even more the centrality of the work you are all doing. Thank you.